We are on week 2 of a series that we're doing looking at the Dhammapada. So this is the version of the book that is Bhante Sangharakshita's translation of this this very ancient, very key text. I'm really pleased we're doing it. We're only on week 2 and I really love it. Even more again. So Gosika kindly stepped in to give the talk last week. I don't know who was here for it, and I watched it, and it's a completely brilliant talk. So if you haven't seen it, tune into the Cambridge Buddhist Centre YouTube channel, and you'll be able to see his talk. It's really fantastic, and he draws out a few things. I'll just sort of recap with what he said. So, so the Dhammapada, it is a really ancient text, and it's pretty clear that it would have been passed down sort of orally. People would have sort of learnt it and memorized it off by heart, and it's relatively short, so you could do that actually. We don't tend to have to remember anything much these days. We don't even need to remember, directions. You used to get in your car and sort of have to remember how to get somewhere or write down sort of notes, but we don't even sort of know how to get anywhere anymore. So maybe it would be good to be able to learn something by heart. People definitely used to learn them by heart. And it's got very simple kind of structure, but definitely, very effective, very, very much it goes in. It's very much the wisdom of the Buddha. You really feel the Buddha coming through, the sort of the dusty robed, sort of barefoot man who sort of walked India and sort of shared with the people that he met his wisdom. And we're not going to be able to do all of it because Gosika gave a really beautiful talk last week, and we got through the first 2 sections, which is this page. So I'm going to do the next 4 stanzas. I'm going to sort of, really sort of go fast ahead with the next 4 stanzas. So we're only going to sort of touch lightly on it. So it's really something to read. And Gosika was saying that it's a sort of a text that Buddhists hold dear to their hearts, but it's something that people who aren't Buddhists, it's a text that people know who aren't Buddhists. And he brings out the meaning of the name of the text, the Dhammapada. So Dhamma meaning, Dhamma is both sort of truth and reality, the way things are, and the Buddha's teachings. Those 2 things are the same thing. The Buddha's trying to help us, trying to point towards what's sort of ultimate truth, ultimate reality. And he has to talk quite a bit to try and sort of communicate all of that. So that's the Dharma, and Pada is the footsteps or the football or the path of the Buddha. So the Dhammapada is the sort of the way or the path to truth, to enlightenment, or even in a way that the way and the path is elucidated by the Buddha. Again, same things. And one image, or one aspect of the Buddha that I really love as an image, sometimes you see the very old art and architecture of India has just the Buddha's feet. Actually, not just of India, of Southeast Asia, it just has the Buddha's feet, the Buddhapada. So sometimes you just see these funny looking feet, I have to say, but you just see the Buddha's feet often in a circle. And that's the sort of the symbol of the Buddha sort of walking the earth. So I quite like that. The Buddha, they're called the Buddhapada, and this text is the Dhammapada. So I'll just read you the first 2 set of pairs. This first chapter is called Pairs. I'll just read you the text for that, and you may well know it. Experiences are preceded by mind, led by mind, and produced by mind. If one speaks or acts with an impure mind, suffering follows, even as the cartwheel follows the hoof of the ox drawing the cart. Experiences are preceded by mind, led by mind, and produced by mind. If one speaks or acts with a pure mind, happiness follows, like a shadow that never departs. I'll just read very slightly different translation. Oops. So this, yeah. We are what we think. All that arises with all that we are arises with our thoughts. With our thoughts we make the world. Speak or act with an impure mind, and trouble will follow you, as the wheel follows the ox that draws the cart. We are what we think. All that we are arises with our thoughts. With our thoughts we make the world. Speak or act with a pure mind, and happiness will follow you as your shadow, unshakable. So Gosuke goes in a bit more into this in a bit more detail, sort of picking up some of the choices of the translation that Sangharakshita uses. But what he points out to us, and what's really important, is that right at the start of this text, the first thing that is the first teaching comes to us is the centrality of our minds, the centrality of how we experience the world, and that we're building our world based on our own minds, based on the clarity of our minds, the emotion behind our mind, but also just based on our conditioning and how familiar we are with our circumstances, with what's sort of going on around us, how confident we feel in ourselves, how familiar we feel. We're building our world all the time. In a way, it's sort of saying from here out in, from here in out. And the Buddha's not saying, well, that doesn't imply that there's not a reality out there. So don't go down that route, because that, you'll forget to follow traffic lights and things like that. That doesn't make any sense, does it? But it's more that we just don't know what that reality is. So we need to come back to what our experience is and sort of move out from that. That's what we can know. But and we'll go further into this as we go through this talk. But the implication is that the mind is central and the mind is primary. And the implication is that it is crucial to our happiness and crucial to our suffering. So we can't rely on others or what's outside of us. We need to be aware and take stock ourselves. So Yashodhaka was talking about mindfulness in the meditation, and the more we can be aware, shockingly, the more that we can be aware of what's going on with me and how present I am in the world, the more I can have agency and influence over how I respond and even receive the world. Yeah. So I've decided I'm going to just read this again, and I'm going to substitute the word heart for the word mind. So often, our sort of idea of mind is the thinking mind, thoughts, the cerebral mind, the left side of the brain. The logical mind. So when we say mind, in our culture, we kind of have a bias towards that kind of the thinking brain. So if I substitute heart, it just shifts something, doesn't it? And of course, the word in Buddhism is chitta, so mind and heart together. So it's not when I read it again, it's not just heart is in all emotion and sort of sentimentality. It's not that kind of that kind of sort of sense of the heart either, because that's another kind of bias. And well, we know, don't we, that that's also not a reliable way of tuning into the world. I was working for as a research group that looked at a psychology research group that looked at behavior change. And the premise of this is that we have all the information we need to make better decisions in our lives, and maybe around smoking or around health and diet, things like that. We have all the information we need, but actually something else comes forward. We don't, it's hard to act, we don't always act on what we know. Something else comes through. So this other sort of side, this sort of more unconscious side, or this side that's sort of built up of habits and patterns and things like that, that we can't really quite always be aware of, or can't necessarily know how to work with. So when we're thinking of heart in Buddhism, thinking of chitta, it's mind and heart together. It's not all just logic, and it's not all just a kind of emotional response or reaction. So I'm just going to read this again. Yeah, so with the idea that yeah, well, anyhow, let's just see what you think. So experiences are preceded by the heart, led by the heart, and produced by the heart. If one speaks or acts with an impure heart, suffering follows, even as the cartwheel follows the hoof of the ox drawing the cart. Experiences are preceded by the heart, led by the heart, and produced by the heart. If one speaks or acts with a pure heart, happiness follows, like a shadow that never departs. So when I was preparing this talk, I quite liked that shift, actually. I quite liked that shift to sort of come from a kind of a more integrated sense of the quality that's sort of leading. It's good just to mix it up and sort of challenge ourselves in a way. Yeah, so the quality of the heart is connectedness and metta. The quality of the heart, or chitta, is a sort of sense of being integrated and knowing more of ourselves, having more of ourselves involved with what's leading. Yeah, so and goes in his talk, Gosaka reminds us that it's important to note what we do with our minds. I sometimes think of that sort of saying, we are what we eat. Well, we also are what we put into our minds. What's going in is sort of influencing us and creating our world. I was, I think I've told this to different people. I was with my little nephew, and he was 7 at the time, and he loves computer games because he's a 7-year-old boy. We were just doing something, and then he went to sit down, and as he sat down, he went. So in his mind, he was sort of firing a gun because he's in the world of computer games. And I don't know what we were doing, nothing like that. But it was so stark. His mind was in that computer game, and he had a gun in his hand, which I just, I really remember it because it really sort of pained me, actually, to see that he was in that. But I've also had experiences in dreams and things like that when I've been working on the computer a lot. I don't know if anyone else has ever had anything like this, where when I go from one part of the dream to the next part of the dream, I close the window. So that closes down, I go on to the next dream. It's like, yeah, I'm completely sort of in this world of the computer. So I can see that really clearly, but actually I probably don't see all the ways that my mind has been conditioned that I'm completely habituated to. Yeah. So, yes, and Gosaka had these great questions. He goes, he sort of asks us, how have you been occupying your mind today, this week, this year, and throughout our lives? And some days and some weeks, maybe we'll fess up a little more or a little less to how we've been occupying our mind. Where is my mind? Where is my mind right now? And then we're back to Yashodhaka's meditation that he was leading us in, sort of encouraging more and more mindfulness, more and more presentness, because it's only from knowing what's going on that I can sort of have a more a creative response to the world. Yeah, and what the verse, of course, is saying is that actions have consequences. So with a pure mind, with an impure mind, that a mind that is sort of a bit more mired in greed, in hatred, and in delusion, sort of moving from that kind of mind to a mind that is more outward going, sort of more generous, more outward going, more loving, actually both in and out, and that has more of that sort of crystalline awareness, so more sort of presentness, where you know what's going on. Presentness, that you know what's going on, and also that there's a sense of continuity. So my theme at the moment, building up on what Yashodhaka was saying, was I think I've been working a bit on mindfulness over the years, and sometimes I talk about it in these classes. And then I started to realize, do you know what? I've sort of got that enough. I can always work on it more. What I need actually is a bit more sense of continuity of mind, a sort of sense of mindfulness, sort of following along with me, or sort of more awareness that sort of has a sort of sense of that includes part of my vision, includes sort of me sort of moving into the future. So a sort of sense of mindfulness with a sort of sense of continuity in it. So that's where I'm sort of working on mindfulness. I guess we've all got our themes, haven't we? We've all got something that's sort of interesting us in our practice of meditation and Buddhism. Sometimes it's nice to know what our theme is. What's my theme? What's sort of grabbing me? Great. So having done a short recap from Kosaka's talk, I'll move on to the next two verses, and they're pretty challenging actually. So the first verses set up the centrality of mind, and that depending on our states of mind, suffering will follow us, or happiness will follow us like our shadow that never departs. That is an image that comes from a sunny country. So the next verses are those who entertain such thoughts as, he abused me, he beat me, he conquered me, he robbed me, will not still their hatred. Those who do not entertain such thoughts as, she abused me, she beat me, she conquered me, she robbed me, will still their hatred. And I'll just read the other translation here. Look how she abused me and beat me, how she threw me down and robbed me. Live with such thoughts, and you live with hate. Look how he abused me and beat me, how he threw me down and robbed me. Abandon such thoughts and live in love. So I think this is pretty challenging stuff, isn't it? How can I go, if someone beats me, abuses me, robs me, throws me down, I'm being invited by the Buddha and challenged by the Buddha to let go of the hatred, of the enmity, of the blame that sort of goes with that, and to sort of open up to something radically different. And I think we should sort of say at the outset, to me, this is a process, isn't it? This is our practice, but it comes from the first verses as well. So the Buddha is pretty uncompromising, actually, about hatred and anger. The Buddha's pretty uncompromising with it. There's no space in Buddhist practice for even those residual aspects of hatred and anger. But we're not there yet. We've got to sort of face them in ourselves, know them in ourselves. But the challenge is not to justify and sort of get ourselves off the hook. The challenge is to see them and to own them. If you haven't, I've written down here, if you have ill will, you have not taken in the essential nature of the Dharma. And I guess the essential nature of the Dharma is a kind of radical view of interconnectedness. So, and a radical view from the first verses that we are creating our world all the time. So what world am I creating when I've got a sort of hatred and ill will? And what world am I creating when I can have a bit more openness, a bit more sympathy and understanding? I was really moved hearing on the radio one of the mothers of the teenagers, of the students who were murdered in Nottingham. She was absolutely beautiful. She was sort of saying, I don't know how you do this actually at the moment. She was saying there's no space for hatred in this moment. There's no space for sort of a blame. We need to understand what's happened and move from there. And, you know, sometimes I think of, you know, my family being hurt and, you know, I'd love to be in that place that I could honestly say that I would do that. Idealistically, I'm wonderful and I would have a sort of a really open response. But I wonder what my response would be in that moment of someone murdering somebody that I loved, especially, you know, someone in the prime of youth. So I was really, really moved by what she was saying, and there was emotion in her voice, and you can hear it a bit in my voice because it was real what she was saying. She's really, really, in a way, calling out to people to let go of that anger and let go of that hatred and that blame, and see a bigger picture, really, see a bigger picture, and a picture that included love. Yes. So there's a Buddhist teacher from, I guess, someone will correct me if Akavira can tell me when I've made a mistake, Naropa, 11th century?
Maybe earlier.
Maybe even earlier, yeah. So let's say 10th, 11th century. Indian teacher, but a great ascetic. And anyhow, so he says, samsara is the tendency to find fault with others. So samsara is our world of difficulty, our world of suffering, the world that we mostly inhabit. And he says it's the tendency to find fault with others. That's what it is. I really resonate with this, actually. I really resonate with it. Tendency to find fault with myself as well. I think we need to include ourselves in this. Sartre, hell is other people. Is that correct? Yeah. It's like these are, you know, we need to sort of break out of this, don't we? Yeah, so we found our troubles in life are often caused by other people. And I don't know about you, but that is true. All these people getting in the way. Who are these people? And so by doing that, by sort of projecting out into the world all the problems with all the other people who are getting in my way, actually, I'm not really looking at myself. I'm not really seeing myself in the picture, and I'm not taking responsibility. I'm often late. And I remember, you know, years ago being on the bus and just getting so annoyed with every slow person who got on the bus, you know, counting out their pennies and whatever. And I'd be sort of, you know, really like hassled in my mind, oh, you know, hurry up, hurry up, hurry up. or I was late. It wasn't anything to do with the person who was sort of didn't have their change ready or whatever. It was me just projecting out into the world, go faster. But of course, I needed to take responsibility and probably leave 10 minutes earlier on a good day. Yeah. So, and that's a really easy way to see it, isn't it? It's a really easy way to see it. And I remember years back saying to one of my lovely colleagues, it's like, do you know what? I'm not going to, we used to meet for coffee, so I'm not going to moan about the boss anymore. I had a really lovely boss. He was great. But I said to my colleague, you know, we just used to meet and moan. I said, I'm not going to moan about my colleague, our boss anymore. And it was a bit of a tricky moment, actually, because we really bonded in those sessions. And now what were we going to talk about? And he knew that we'd been moaning, but he also found it a bit challenging to hear it described as moaning. And, you know, there were a few buts that came in, you know, but it's all, you know, justify, but what I said, I'm just going to stop. I'm just not going to do it anymore. But we did remain friends. But I was really glad to put that down. It was so unhelpful. Everything was sort of projected out, sort of onto this really lovely guy who was the head of our team. Really, really lovely guy. And he felt it, and I felt it. And how can we have a good team when I'm not taking responsibility in that moaning? I'm not taking responsibility for what I'm bringing to it. And I think this is the challenge of these two verses. What am I creating in this moment when I'm feeling abused and beaten and robbed and everything? Now, many of us have been beaten, abused, robbed, and cheated. So many of us have had those really difficult experiences. And I wouldn't want to say that in this teaching, we need to take it in this kind of absolutist way, because people out there, including me, we're suffering, and actually there is injustice. And there are difficulties that people face. So I think we need to hear this with that heart. Actually, we need to hear this teaching with the heart and know that actually it can be a process. It can be very difficult to live through and to be on the end of really difficult experiences where you've been cheated on, or where you've been abused, or where things have been taken from you. And sometimes there's a need to sort of to really look at that and meet the anger that's there, meet the loss that's there, the hurt that's there, the different parts of us that have been hurt and negated, abused in those moments. So I think we don't want to hear this uncompromising teaching from the Buddha in a way that has any sense of punishment in it. We need to be really sensitive to that. So I hope that's really clear, actually, because sometimes people have been in situations that no one would choose, and it's just sometimes you need to meet that in yourself with a lot of kindness and absolutely no blame. And of course, the other side of it is that many of us may have also been abusers. We might have beaten someone up. Maybe it's verbally. Maybe we've sort of landed a punch. Maybe we've stolen things. Maybe we've cheated through lying. Maybe we've cheated on people that we love. So the other side of that is the side of that's also, our humanness as well. So it's not all that we've been done to. Sometimes we've been the person who's doing to. And that can also be something difficult to hold. There's a great book called The Body Keeps the Score, and it's a book about trauma in the body, trying to work with trauma in the body and be with trauma in the body. And there's a story relatively sort of towards the front of the book that I found really moving, actually. So this psychologist working with a lot of Vietnam veterans in America, looking at the trauma of war and how they're storing all of that trauma in their body. And then it comes out that one of the men, what's really their difficulty is that having been in an awful siege moment and, you know, sort of being attacked, sort of, you know, being in war, he then went out and retaliated with some indiscriminate killing and things like that in a village. And for him, the worst trauma was that he had then, you know, done these terrible acts that no one deserved, and that he'd sort of gone beyond where he thought as a human he could go. He didn't, you know, he didn't know he was that person. When you read the account, you think, God, you know, the people around him were killed. He was fighting for his life. This is what happens to human beings. So I think there's two parts of this, really. There's the human part of what sort of we feel has been done to us, but then there's also just sort of also being with, perhaps sometimes how we have not always acted from the best part of us. And it can be in all sorts of small ways as well. It can just be stealing stationery at work. You know, it can be those small ways that we sort of fudge our relationship to the world, to sort of more difficult things that we might have in our experience. Well, the way to move through this on either side is through love and kindness. Yeah, metta. Metta is the quality that we need to bring in to our experience. Metta, universal loving kindness, to meet the difficulties that are, in our experience, and to open up to something that's sort of higher and bigger and completely, utterly accepting. And that is also full of love. It's more than just accepting. It's actually an experience that's full of love. And sometimes we're doing the metta bhavana and we're trying to get in contact with a quality of metta that's ours personally. And that's a really good practice. And sometimes something shifts and we can open up to a quality of metta that's not particularly coming from me. It's a bigger quality of love that is just present somehow in the universe and the world. So metta, this universal loving kindness that I can channel, and it can feel like me, but it also can be an experience of something that's beyond me and that we all share. So it's pretty challenging stuff. I was listening to a talk by Padmavajra on this, and he was talking about resentment and blame and grudge holding in relation to these verses. And he says, when we get stuck in that, when we get stuck in this happened to me, this has been so difficult, we're not actually taking responsibility. We're being a bit passive in our experience. And we can, in order to sort of get over that somehow, we need to bring ourselves a bit more fully into our experience and take responsibility. And that, from what I've just been talking about, that can be hard. But, we need to sort of stand in our space and take responsibility. With sensitivity, just from everything else I've just been sort of saying. Yeah. yeah, that sort of taking responsibility might also be about giving yourself time to heal, time to know yourself, time to be in connection and to renew. And it might also be a time to sort of just look at yourself more straightforwardly. We've all got the sort of the positives and the sort of difficulties within us. It's pretty uncompromising verse, really, isn't it? Yeah, but well, let's go on. Let's go on. So the next verse, it's super beautiful. These next verses, they sort of move me very, very deeply. So I'll read the whole 4 verses now. Those who entertain such thoughts as he abused me, he beat me, he conquered me, he robbed me, will not still their hatred. Those who do not entertain such thoughts as she abused me, she beat me, she conquered me, she robbed me, will still their hatred. Not by hatred are hatreds ever pacified here in the world. They are pacified by love. This is the eternal law. Others do not realize that we are all heading for death. Those who do realize it will compose their quarrels. So I'll just read the other translation because I really particularly love this one. In this world, hate never yet dispelled hate. Only love dispels hate. This is the law, ancient and inexhaustible. You too shall pass away. Knowing this, how can you quarrel? In this world, hate never yet dispelled hate. Only love dispels hate. This is the law, ancient and inexhaustible. So it's a sort of it's more than an invitation. The Buddha's sort of really sort of talking about the nature of how things are. Love is the force that is the greatest force in the world. Hatred will never solve any problems. Only love, acceptance, metta, solves these problems. And in a way, I don't think we probably need much convincing about this. We can just look at the world around us. We kind of know it in our beings, don't we? We know that hatred never solves the problems. It's only through something bigger, something a bit transpersonal, something a bit beyond where I'm at, something not reactionary, something open that can make the connections, which is what love really is, that can let go. Yeah, and we can look at our own experience. Have we ever solved any of our difficulties by sort of bringing in, that snarky remark and the sort of whatever it might be that we sort of bring in that sort of is so unhelpful, that sort of hardening of the heart. It doesn't really solve anything, does it? It sort of just entrenches things. And it has a big effect on ourselves. I think that's one thing from here. It's like we're looking at our relationships, but it's also we're thinking of mind as primary. What's that doing to my mind? I'm hardening my position. I'm hardening my sense of self, and I'm creating a kind of barrier between myself and another person or another group of people. So to loosen that up, you can imagine that also loosens up my mind, loosens up my heart, loosens up my being, and I can be open and in connection once again. And that is happiness in a way. We're sort of looking at what makes it, what sort of creates a sort of sense of happiness and positivity in ourselves. That creates happiness. And it's only from this that we can sort of step forward into the bigger parts of ourselves. The bigger parts of ourselves are not the the sort of the hatreds that contract and the ill wills. The bigger parts of ourselves are the parts that open up to risk, to courage, to stepping towards something in ourselves that might be a bit scary, but towards another person, another situation that also might be a bit scary. I don't really quite know how you never know when you're going to give a talk how it's quite going to land, do you? But I can feel sort of like it's sort of landing. But this, I find this completely beautiful. I wish I could tell you quite how to do it, but I don't know how to do it. But it gives me, it opens my heart to read these verses. You know, only love dispels hate. This is the law, ancient and inexhaustible. So the practice here is metta. That's the great practice to do. For me, I think it's our most radical practice. Our most radical practice we have in Buddhism and in Triratna is the metta bhavana, is moving beyond a sense of a fixed me here to opening out to more and more connection with more and more people all around the world. So that, you know, I bring this attitude of love and connection to all my interactions, going beyond my fixed sort of small self to step into sort of something bigger, into all those more connections. Yeah. So yes, I've put down here, the emergence of love is the transformation. So that's the transformation from the sort of greed, hatred, and delusion through to generosity, love, and present and mindfulness. Love that pacifies hatred is metta. Loving kindness is the way. So, yes, metta, open-ended, without strings. Love for other beings, other people, just as they are, with no strings attached and no agenda. Meeting this love, other people, you know, this metta, other, you know, people open up, don't they? People open up, they share, they feel warmth, they feel confidence. The real connection is made. It's a real gift to meet somebody with an open heart and to meet them with love. In this talk from Padmavajra, he quotes a lovely little bit from Rumi. Through love, bitter things become sweet. Through love, copper becomes golden. Through love, the dregs become pure. Through love, pains become medicine. Through love, the dead are made to come alive. So, verse 7, you too shall pass away. Knowing this, how can you quarrel? And that's the great leveler, isn't it? Death is the great leveler. If we can really take in the sort of the shortness of our lives, the preciousness of our lives and of other people's lives, and of our connections together, the potential of what we could build if we were coming more from love, more from metta, well, what a different world we could have, what a different relationship I could have with people. And, well, you know, with my mind, I create the world. What sort of world would I meet if I was doing more metta bhavana, opening up and sort of really practicing, walking through the world with an attitude of potentiality, of these beautiful human beings that I could meet and have connections with, and meeting each person with a sense of their inherent goodness and their inherent potentiality. These verses were reminding me of how I'm relating to my mum now that she is in her old age and sort of not very well. It's like, compose your quarrels. It's like, oh God, if I'd only known this earlier, you know, all those petty quarrels, all those sort of ways that I was wanting to sort of, I mean, maybe that's what mothers and daughters do, sons and fathers, you know, wanting to prove myself or assert myself or be this or be that, or just, you know, knowing better. she'd only lived all these years ahead of me, but anyhow, I knew better. Yeah, and now I can see there's nothing to quarrel about. You know, I can let so much go, knowing that she's dying. I am composing my quarrels and relating to her on the basis of the love that I have for her, and really sort of bringing that out more and more. How can I connect more and more while she's here with the love that I have? How can I actually know that love myself? Actually, there's work for me to do on really being more appreciative there. Yeah.